I still remember the smell of his cologne when he leaned in close that night, whispering that I was special, different from all the others. I believed him. At 19, I was naive enough to think our love was the stuff of fairy tales, until he systematically dismantled my life piece by piece, leaving me with nothing but scars that would take decades to heal. The worst part? He's back now, acting like nothing ever happened, while I'm still picking up the pieces of the life he shattered 20 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment my life split into before and after. It was spring semester of my sophomore year at Northwestern. I was pre-med with a 3.9 GPA, the first in my family to go to college, and determined to become a surgeon. My parents had sacrificed everything to get me there. My dad working 2 jobs, my mom cleaning houses on weekends. Their pride was my fuel. Then I met Ryan at a campus mixer. Tall, charismatic, from old money. He was everything I wasn't. He wore privilege like a second skin, never questioning his place in the world. When he singled me out from across the room, I couldn't believe. Someone like him would notice someone like me. "You're thinking too hard," he said, handing me a drink. "I can see your brain working from across the room." Our relationship moved at lightning speed. 3 weeks in, he was introducing me to his family at their lake house. His mother took one look at me, the scholarship student from the wrong side of Chicago, and I watched her smile freeze in place. "Ryan tends to go through phases," she told me later that weekend, cornering me in the kitchen. "Last year it was rock climbing. The year before that, sailing. I'm sure you're lovely, dear, but don't get too comfortable." I should have run then. Instead, I became determined to prove her wrong. By summer, Ryan had convinced me to move in with him, to drop a required course that conflicted with a vacation he'd planned, to distance myself from friends who didn't understand our connection. Small compromises that seemed insignificant at the time. "You don't need to be a doctor," he would say, tracing patterns on my shoulder at night. "With my family's connections, we could travel, start a business together. Don't you want freedom?" What he meant was, don't you want to be completely dependent on me? The isolation happened so gradually I barely noticed. First, it was casual comments about my best friend Layla, how she seemed jealous of our relationship, how her jokes were actually digs at him. Then it was my study group. They were using me for my notes, he said. Then my parents. They were holding me back with their old world expectations. By winter break, I was failing 2 classes, had lost my work-study position, and was barely speaking to anyone outside of Ryan's social circle. Even then, I didn't. See what was happening. Love is the perfect blindfold. The week before finals, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told Ryan, his face went through a series of expressions I'll never forget. Shock, calculation, and finally, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This changes everything," he said, pulling me close. "We'll figure it out together." The next morning, I woke up to find him gone, along with my laptop containing all my final papers and study notes. My phone was missing too. Panicked, I used his desktop computer to check my email, only to find he had accessed my accounts and sent messages to my professors claiming I was withdrawing from classes due to personal issues. When he returned that evening, he acted as if nothing was wrong. When I confronted him about the emails, he denied everything, suggesting I must have sent them myself during a stress-induced blackout. The gaslighting was so effective that for a moment, I questioned my own sanity. "You need help?" he said, voice dripping with concern. "I've been worried about you for weeks. The mood swings, the academic struggles. My parents know a great facility where you can rest." That night, I overheard him on the phone with his mother. "It's handled. She'll be gone by the weekend. No, she won't be a problem." I waited until he fell asleep, then silently packed what I could carry. I took $200 from his wallet, all the money I had access to since he'd convinced me to close my personal account and open a joint one he controlled. I left in the middle of a snowstorm with nowhere to go. Layla took me in despite our months of estrangement. The next morning, we discovered Ryan had reported my laptop and phone as stolen. Campus security was looking for me. He'd told them I was mentally unstable, potentially dangerous to myself and others due to a family history of schizophrenia, a condition nobody in my family had ever had. By the time I got to the dean's office, to explain, Ryan's father's law firm had contacted the university. They painted me as an unstable scholarship student who had become obsessed with their son, who had fabricated a pregnancy when he tried to end things. They had documents, texts, emails, journal entries, all forged, but convincing enough. I was placed on academic probation pending a psychiatric evaluation. My scholarship was suspended. When I tried to reach my parents, I discovered Ryan had contacted them weeks earlier, feeding them lies about me using drugs, stealing from roommates. My father, with his rigid moral code, told me not to come home until I straightened myself out. Within 48 hours, I had lost everything: my education, my family's support, my reputation, my future. And I was still pregnant, alone, with no resources. I ended up staying on Layla's couch, working double shifts at a diner to save enough for an apartment. I had to drop out of school. There was no way to fight the narrative Ryan had created. His family had connections everywhere, and I was just a poor girl from Chicago with no proof of what had really happened. 3 months later, I miscarried. The doctor said it was likely due to stress and overwork, another piece of me gone because of him. I spent the next 5 years rebuilding my life from scratch, community college classes at night, working multiple jobs during the day. I'd given up on becoming a doctor. That dream felt like it had belonged to someone else, someone who died the night I fled Ryan's apartment. By the time I was 25, I had managed to complete an associate's degree in nursing. It wasn't the medical career I'd planned, but it was healthcare, and I was good at it. I found a position at a small clinic in Milwaukee, far enough from Chicago and Northwestern that I could start fresh where no one knew my story. For years, I jumped at shadows, expecting Ryan to reappear and destroy everything again. But as time passed, the fear faded to background noise. I made new friends, dated occasionally, though never seriously, and found purpose in my work. I even reconciled with my parents after showing them proof of Ryan's deception. Old messages Layla had saved, a statement from a professor who believed me. I thought I was safe. I thought it was over. Then, last month, 15 years after I'd last seen him, Ryan walked into my clinic as the new hospital administrator. He pretended not to recognize me at first. Then, after the staff meeting, he cornered me in the break room. "Rebecca," he said, my name in his mouth like poison. What a surprise. "You look, well, time has been kinder to some of us than others." I stood frozen, coffee mug gripped so tightly my knuckles went white. He looked exactly the same, just with distinguished touches of gray at his temples. Success had only made him more polished, more confident. "I've been following your career," he continued, voice low enough that only I could hear. "Impressive. How you bounced back. From nurse's aide to charge nurse in what, 10 years? Of course, you could have been a surgeon by now if things had gone differently." Before I could respond, he placed his hand on my shoulder, leaning in close enough that I could smell that same cologne from 20 years ago. "Let's catch up properly sometime. I'm sure we have so much to talk about." Then he was gone, leaving me trembling in the break room, the life I'd carefully constructed suddenly as fragile as glass. That night, I discovered my personnel file had been flagged for review. Complaints that hadn't existed the day before had mysteriously appeared. Medication errors I never made. Conflicts with patients I never had. The next week, my hours were cut. The week after that, I was moved from the department I'd run for 5 years to a floating position with no fixed schedule. He was doing it again, systematically dismantling my life with a precision that left no fingerprints. And this time, he had even more power, more resources. I tried to report what was happening, but without proof, it was my word against his. And Ryan had spent the intervening years cultivating an impeccable reputation as a healthcare innovator and philanthropist. There were literal magazine profiles celebrating his work. Who would believe me? I started documenting everything, recording conversations when legal, saving emails, noting times and dates of every interaction. I reached out to an attorney, but the retainer fee alone was more than I could afford on my reduced salary. Meanwhile, Ryan made sure to remind me of his presence daily. It was never anything obvious. A lingering glance across the cafeteria, appearing in the parking garage at the same time as me, casual references to my past during staff meetings that only I would understand. "We need people who can commit long-term," he said during one meeting, eyes locked on mine. "Not those who crack under pressure and abandon their responsibilities." After weeks of psychological warfare, I finally confronted him in his office, recording device hidden in my pocket. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "Haven't you done enough?" He leaned back in his chair, looking genuinely amused. "Want? I don't want anything from you, Rebecca. This is just an extraordinary coincidence. Unless you're suggesting I orchestrated a multi-million-dollar hospital acquisition just to mess with a former girlfriend? That would be rather extreme, don't you think? Then why are you doing this? The complaints, the schedule changes. Those are standard reviews for all departments under new management," he said smoothly. "If you're experiencing difficulties, perhaps it's your own guilty conscience projecting intentions onto normal business operations." I felt that familiar vertigo of doubting my own reality, the same feeling I'd had in his apartment 20 years ago. But this time, I was prepared. "I know what you did back then," I said. "I have proof now, emails, witness statements. If you don't stop whatever game you're playing, I'll go public." Something flashed in his eyes, cold calculation I remembered all too well. "Be very careful, Rebecca," he said, voice soft. "Defamation suits are expensive to defend, and nurses don't make much. Besides, who exactly would believe you? The troubled ex who couldn't handle a breakup? The scholarship student who couldn't cut it at Northwestern? That's the narrative that exists in official records. Your word against a paper trail 2 decades old." He stood up, coming around the desk to stand uncomfortably close. "I built a good life after you," he continued. "Executive MBA from Wharton. Marriage to a congressman's daughter. 2 perfect children. Charitable foundation. And now, this hospital network. Do you really think anyone would believe I'd risk all that over a college fling?" I stood my ground. "Why are you really here? You could run any hospital in the country." For the first time, his mask slipped, just for a second. Perhaps I never liked unfinished business, or loose ends. As I turned to leave, he added, "By the way, how's your mother? I heard her arthritis is getting worse. Shame about those insurance complications with her treatment. Health system bureaucracy can be so unpredictable." The implied threat froze my blood. Somehow he'd accessed my mother's medical records, had possibly already interfered with her care. The message was clear. He could reach anyone I cared about. That night, I couldn't sleep. The recording I'd made captured nothing incriminating. Ryan was too smart for that. Every threat was implied, every action defensible. On paper, he was a successful administrator making routine changes. I was the problem employee with a mysterious gap in my employment history and education. As I stared at the ceiling, memories I'd suppressed for years came flooding back. The night before I'd discovered I was pregnant, Ryan had invited friends over. I remembered feeling strangely disoriented after just one drink, the room spinning as Ryan led me to the bedroom to lie down. I'd dismissed it as fatigue or stress. But now, with years of medical knowledge, I recognized the symptoms of being drugged. Had he planned everything from the beginning? The timing of my emotional breakdown, the perfectly orchestrated dismissal from school, had it all been to cover something worse that I couldn't even remember? The next day at work, I found a note slipped into my locker. Some memories are better left buried, for everyone's sake. I realized then that whatever Ryan had done 20 years ago, whatever he was hiding, it was serious enough that he'd spent resources tracking me down and orchestrating this elaborate scenario to neutralize me. This wasn't just about a college relationship gone wrong. This was about something that could still damage him, even at the height of his success. And whatever it was, I was going to find out. Because this time, I wasn't a frightened 19-year-old girl with no resources and no support. This time, I was ready to fight back. Whatever it took, I was going to expose Ryan for what he really was, even if it meant losing everything again. But I never imagined just how far he would go to keep his secrets buried, or that the truth would be far more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. The morning after Ryan's veiled threat about my mother, I woke to 3 missed calls from the nursing home. My hands trembled as I called back, relieved to hear Mom was fine, but her insurance had mysteriously denied coverage for her arthritis. Medication overnight. Just as Ryan had implied. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through old photos on my laptop, evidence I'd kept all these years without knowing why. Something in one image caught my eye. Ryan's college roommate, Daniel, lurking in the background of a party photo, watching us with an unreadable expression. Daniel, who'd always seemed uncomfortable around me, who'd avoided eye contact, who'd moved out mid-semester after a hushed argument with Ryan I wasn't supposed to overhear. Maybe he knew something. Tracking Daniel down wasn't easy. He'd gone off-grid years ago. No social media, no digital footprint beyond a 10-year-old research paper on tropical diseases. According to his outdated faculty bio, he'd left academia to work with Doctors Without Borders. The trail went cold. In Sierra Leone. While I searched for Daniel, Ryan escalated his campaign. My performance reviews plummeted. Colleagues grew distant, eyeing me with suspicion. Patients requested different nurses. Someone had been whispering poison in everyone's ears. Then came the anonymous complaint to the nursing board, allegations that I'd stolen narcotics. An investigation was opened. My license, the cornerstone of my rebuilt life, hung in the balance. The night after my board interview, I found my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was taken, but everything had been touched. Drawers slightly ajar, books misaligned, picture frames tilted. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I dug through old storage boxes until I found the journal I'd kept during those months with Ryan. Its pages held forgotten details, names, dates, places, breadcrumbs I'd left for my future self. One entry stood out. Our invited new girl. From biochem to dinner. Acted weird when I mentioned her later. Something about a project they're working on. Said not to mention it to anyone. I recalled the girl, shy, brilliant, always clutching her research notes. She'd stopped coming to class around the same time Ryan had begun isolating me. I'd barely noticed then, consumed by my own unraveling. Her name was Angela Mercer. Unlike Daniel, Angela left digital footprints everywhere. She'd become a pharmaceutical researcher, her name attached to patents and papers. Currently, she worked for Helix Biomedical, a company owned by Ryan's family's investment group. I sent her a message through LinkedIn, keeping it vague. Former Northwestern classmate. Need to discuss a sensitive matter regarding Ryan Harrington. Her response came within hours. Holiday Inn, room 4 and 12, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Come alone. Don't bring your phone. The paranoia in her message should have alarmed me, but instead, it validated my suspicions. Whatever Ryan was hiding, Angela knew. I arrived early, sweeping the hotel room for recording devices as I'd learned to do during a hospital security training. Angela arrived precisely at 8, her eyes darting nervously around the room before she'd fully stepped inside. She'd aged 2 decades in 20 years, deep lines etched around hollow eyes, hair prematurely gray. Her hands shook as she set her purse down. "You're the girl," she said, studying me. "The one he used to cover it up." "Cover what up?" She laughed bitterly. "You really don't know, do you? I thought you were blackmailing him. That's why he's back. To neutralize you." "I'm not blackmailing anyone. I was his girlfriend in college until he systematically destroyed my life. Now he's shown up at my workplace, and he's doing it again." Angela sank onto the bed. The fight, draining from her. Then why now? After all these years? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What happened at Northwestern, Angela? What was the project you two were working on? Her eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" I explained about my journal entry. With each word, Angela grew paler. "It wasn't just a project," she whispered finally. "It was supposed to be revolutionary. Ryan's senior thesis, a compound that could potentially erase specific traumatic memories without affecting overall cognitive function. Perfect for PTSD treatment." The room tilted as pieces clicked into place. The disorientation after drinks, the gaps in my memory. "He used it on me," I said, the words barely audible. Angela nodded. "You were his human trial, but something went wrong. The compound had an unexpected effect. Instead of erasing specific memories, it created gaps, cognitive instability. When you started experiencing symptoms, he panicked. The mood swings, the academic struggles he claimed I was having, side effects. The compound was interacting with your brain chemistry, causing episodes he could paint as mental illness. When you got pregnant..." My hand flew to my stomach, a phantom pain blooming. "The miscarriage? Was that?" "The compound caused developmental abnormalities. His family paid to bury the research, destroy all evidence. They couldn't risk it becoming public, the legal implications, the damage to their pharmaceutical empire. That's why he orchestrated my breakdown, to discredit me in case I ever remembered." Angela's voice dropped lower. "There were others. Rebecca. After you. Girls with similar stories, mental breakdowns, mysterious withdrawals. 3 suicides that got quietly settled with NDAs. Horror crawled up my spine. And you knew? All this time?" Her face crumpled. "I was 20. They threatened. My career, my family. By the time I understood the full scope, the evidence was gone. Who would believe me against the Harringtons?" I leaned forward. "Why is he afraid of me now? After all this time?" "Because of the congressional investigation. They're looking into experimental neurochemical testing from that era. If anyone connected to the original research surfaces with evidence..." She let the implication hang. "So he tracked me down to make sure I stayed discredited." Angela reached into her purse, hands trembling, and withdrew a thumb drive. "I saved what I could. Raw data, trial notes, chemical formulas. It won't mean much to you, but to the right people." As she passed it to me, the hotel room door burst open. 2 men in suits entered, eyes cold and professional. Behind them stood Ryan. "Angela," he sighed, disappointed. "I expected better risk assessment from my head researcher." Angela lunged for her purse, but one man intercepted her, twisting her arm behind her back. I closed my fist around the thumb. Drive? Slipping it into my sleeve? Ryan turned to me, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Rebecca, always turning up where you're not wanted." "Like your conscience?" I countered, buying time as I scanned the room for escape routes. He laughed. Still feisty. That's what made you interesting. Most subjects were much more compliant. We have witnesses, Angela spat. People who've kept records. Like poor Daniel? Ryan asked. Currently enjoying an extended stay in a Myanmar prison on drug trafficking charges? Or Professor Hayes, whose dementia diagnosis was so sudden and severe? My blood ran cold. He'd systematically neutralized everyone who could corroborate our story. What's your plan, Ryan? Another mental breakdown? I'm not a frightened college student anymore. People will notice if I disappear. He studied me thoughtfully. Nothing so dramatic. In fact, you'll be the hero of your own story. He gestured to his men. A tragic relapse into substance abuse. A nurse with access to medications. A history of mental instability. You checked yourself into an exclusive treatment facility. Very private, very secure. By the time you're stabilized, the congressional hearings will be long over. The men advanced toward me. I backed up until I hit the wall. Why not just kill me? I asked, playing for time as I inched toward the bathroom. Deaths raise questions. Recovery programs ensure privacy. Besides, his voice softened with genuine regret. I liked you, Rebecca. Once. In that moment of distraction, I made my move, lunging for the bathroom and slamming the door. I wedged a towel rack under the handle, buying seconds at most. The window was small but not impossible. As the men began ramming the door, I smashed the glass with the toilet tank lid and squeezed through the opening, thumb drive clutched in, my bleeding hand. I fell hard onto the fire escape, pain shooting through my ankle. 3 floors down, no time to hesitate. I half climbed, half fell down the metal structure as shouts echoed above me. In the alley below, I limped toward the street, desperate for witnesses, for safety in numbers. My phone. I'd left it in the room as Angela instructed. No way to call. For help. Headlights swept the alley entrance. A black SUV. I ducked behind a dumpster, heart hammering against my ribs. Footsteps approached, unhurried, confident. You're only making this harder, Ryan called out, voice echoing between the buildings. We have your mother's nursing home on speed dial, your friend Layla's address. How long before someone you care about pays for your stubbornness? The thumb drive burned in my palm, suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. Evidence that could bring down an empire, expose decades of crimes, justice for countless victims, weighed against the immediate safety of those I loved. 30 seconds, Rebecca, Ryan called. Then we make a call. I closed my eyes, mind racing. There had to be a third option. Some way to protect my loved ones and still expose the truth. Then I remembered. The cloud storage account I'd set up years ago. Paranoid after losing everything once before. An account Ryan knew nothing about. Registered under a name he wouldn't recognize. I needed just 5 minutes with an internet connection. 5 minutes to upload the data, set it to automatically release to journalists, investigators, and congressional committees if I didn't enter a passcode every 24 hours. A dead woman's switch, and... Coming out, I called, voice steady despite my terror. I'll cooperate. Ryan appeared at the end of the alley, silhouetted against streetlights. Wise choice. I limped forward, one hand extended in surrender, the other clutching the drive hidden in my sleeve. I'd give them this copy. Let them think they'd won. When I reached him, Ryan took my arm with surprising gentleness. It didn't have to be this way, he murmured, almost regretful. If you'd just stayed gone. I could say the same to you, I replied, allowing him to guide me toward the waiting SUV. As we approached the vehicle, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Ryan's grip tightened. A coincidence, he hissed. But an inconvenient one. Let's move. The hotel's side door burst open. Angela stumbled out, face bloodied but determined, followed by hotel security and the flashing lights of camera phones. She'd created a scene loud enough to draw attention, Witnesses, recordings, evidence. Ryan's men hesitated, looking to him for direction. In that moment of confusion, I twisted from his grasp and ran toward the growing crowd, screaming for help. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ryan lunged after me, his controlled facade finally cracking. "Stop her!" he shouted, desperation replacing his usual calm calculation. Security intercepted him. Bystanders pulled me into their protective circle. Phones recorded everything. Police cars turned into the hotel drive. Ryan locked eyes with me across the chaos, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. He knew what I had, knew what it could do. For the first time in 20 years, he wasn't in control. As police officers approached, I clutched the thumb drive tighter, realizing this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. Ryan's family had endless resources, political connections, the power to bury evidence and silence witnesses. One thumb drive wouldn't be enough, but it was a start. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. Hours later, bandaged and exhausted in a hospital room with a police officer posted outside, I finally connected to the internet. With trembling fingers, I uploaded the contents of Angela's thumb drive, set my dead man's switch, and sent copies to every investigative journalist and congressional committee member I could find. Then I wrote my story, all of it, from the sob. First night I met Ryan to the alley behind the Holiday Inn. I attached medical records, witness statements from Angela, everything I had. Before I hit send, I added one final line. If anything happens to me or those I love, it will only prove every word I've written is true. Then I waited, knowing Ryan's next move would be far more dangerous than anything he'd done before, because now he had nothing left to lose. But neither did I. And after 20 years of running, of rebuilding, of surviving, I was finally ready to fight back. What I never expected was how the truth, once unleashed, would ripple far beyond Ryan and me, exposing crimes committed by some of the most powerful families in America, or that the scared college girl he'd tried to destroy would become the key witness in the largest pharmaceutical fraud case in history. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but justice burns like fire. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.